The first wave of Japanese planes will arrive at Pearl Harbor in a matter of minutes, and they are hoping for surprise. But if that surprise should fail, if the enemy is ready for them, what in the world will they do then? Now at 7:40 a.m., Mitsuo Fuchida gives the signal for the attack.
フロントグラスを開けて信号ピストルを下方に撃ちました。
I opened the windshield and shot a flare downwards with my signal pistol. The signal flare flowed, dragged a tail of black smoke. One flare was the command of deployment for the launch of the surprise attack. Having completed giving the order for deployment, I was watching the movements of each group. The torpedo bombing squadron was lowering its altitude. Meanwhile, the air superiority squadron that was supposed to increase speed to take the lead position did not move into action. I guessed that it must have been because they missed seeing the signal due to clouds that blocked their visibility. Then, I released another signal flare towards the air superiority squadron. This time, the air superiority squadron immediately understood, gathered speed, and advanced towards the sky above Oahu.
You might think that Fuchida has given the signal for attacking in case of being spotted, which is firing 2 flares, instead of the signal for attacking in case of surprise, which is 1 flare. But this is not the case. His planes all understand that they still have surprise on their side. Well, when the fleet left Japan, the plan was only, and I mean only, built around surprise. This is true. It's now been nearly a year since Yamamoto first had the overall concept, and it's been developed by Genda and company all this time, and the attack planning really did cover only the best case scenario. And even more surprising, no one even realizes it until Yamamoto gives a speech to his staff officers a few days before departure, warning not to be overconfident and to be prepared for American resistance. Seriously, Genda realizes on that spot that he has not at all considered that. So he and Fuchida meet with Murata, who leads the torpedo bombers, to decide what to do if they do not achieve surprise. In that case, the slow torpedo bombers would not go in first. The other bombers would do that to draw fire away from the torpedo bombers. That is literally the only contingency change they make at all. But you know what? The operational plan says Kido Butai will still attack even if they're detected up to 24 hours before scheduled attack time. Well, it's under a quarter of an hour until scheduled attack time, and they don't seem to have been detected. In fact, the Japanese First Air Fleet has sailed the North Pacific Ocean for 12 days and 3,000 odd miles undetected to get here today. Admiral Nagumo has done his duty for all that he complained several times en route to his Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Kusaka, that he regretted being part of such a hopeless mission, and that the enemy would surely spot them, or worse, Tokyo would radio the message to abort and turn back, but they wouldn't pick it up and would go ahead and attack, and then he personally would be responsible for starting a war. But they did pick up every message, every one of them, including Commander Yamamoto's final words to the fleet, words of inspiration. The fate of our empire depends on this expedition. Each of you will do your duty, wearing yourself to the bone. The Japanese air crews have been well briefed before today. In fact, they use a large-scale model of Pearl Harbor, the same scale apparently as the harbor would be from 10,000 feet to do it. And the pilots have been trained since the end of September. It is the air group commanders who have been in charge of the training. Fuchida for the horizontal bombers attacking the fleet. Shimazaki for the OCA horizontal bombers, those attacking the enemy air power. Takahashi, the OCA dive bombers. Egusa, the fleet dive bombers. And Itaya, the fighters. They were dispersed to different airfields for training by type. So there's been no combined training. Fighters have not practiced escorting bombers or protecting them during bombing runs. Combined arms and mutual support was not in the Japanese mindset. Hickam Field is where the U.S. Army bombers are based, and is just a few hundred yards down the road from the Pearl Harbor entrance. Construction was begun in 1934 when Luke Field on Ford Island grew too congested. Hickam was actually the largest peacetime military construction the U.S. had ever done. In 1937, the first planes arrived, even though it's still under construction, and it is officially opened in 1938. Construction begins on the main barracks in 1939, and by the end of 1940, all Air Corps personnel and activities have been transferred. By activities, I even mean things like the chapel and the theater, which are dismantled, brought across the channel, and then rebuilt. When the barracks are completed in 1940, it is the largest structure of any kind on an American military installation, and the only airfield in Hawaii large enough to handle the B-17s. All the planes there now are grouped together out in the open because of General Short's sabotage alert. The planes that can actually fly, at any rate, which is 6 B-17s, 6 A-20s, and 17 B-18s. This is a big day, though, for those 12 awesome new B-17s are soon to arrive. The first of them nears Hawaii and radios Hickam at 7:45. It is still too far away, though, so the transmission is too broken to understand. They'll be here soon. Wheeler Field is in the middle of the island and is responsible for the air defense of the Hawaiian Islands territory. So it's where the fighter planes are based. In fact, there are 62 brand new P-40 Warhawks there, neatly lined up in rows. Also there are the pilots from last night's poker game, who are slowly coming back to life. Phil Rasmussen, hungover, dressed in purple pajama trousers and a t-shirt, makes his way to the latrine. Kenneth Taylor and George Welch are planning to go back to Halewa today for some flight exercises. They are dressed and at breakfast, unlike their Halewa junior colleague Gordon Sterling. He is just waking up, but probably already looking forward to seeing his fiancée Peggy Olsson later on, who is still in the maternity ward at Schofield Barracks. In Pearl City, the Stagner family is now in full breakfast mode. Papaya, Portuguese sausages, rice, and eggs. That sounds really good. The radio continues to play softly in the background. On the ships in the harbor, preparations are underway for the raising of colors, the 8 a.m. signal that the day has begun, the moment when all clocks are synchronized. On Arizona, the ship's band is gathering on deck to play the Star-Spangled Banner when the colors go up at 8 o'clock sharp. In the row ahead of her, on West Virginia, Ensign Victor Delano is about to start his ship. The 21-year-old is from a Navy family and graduated with distinction from Annapolis Naval Academy in February of this year. West Virginia is his first assignment. At this moment, somewhere off Lahi Lahi Point, Fuchida is about to signal to begin the approach for attack.
I looked back at the telegrapher. Chief Petty Officer Mizuki sent the message to all planes. All forces attack.
The signal is to, an abbreviation of Totsugeki, 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 Japanese for assault, assault, assault. Fuchida's planes have split into two groups. One group of 43 Zeros is heading for the airfields at Wheeler, Ewa, Kaneohe, and towards Pearl Harbor from the northwest. The main group of 140 planes with the torpedo bombers heads south to attack Pearl Harbor. Shortly after breaking off, the 43 Zeros fly over Halewa Field, but do not attack. For whatever reason, the Japanese have failed to take Halewa into account in their attack plans. The main group headed for Pearl splits again, one to attack from the north side and the second from the south. Fuchida himself increases his altitude and heads straight for Pearl. The Zeros soon reach both sides of Wheeler Field. The squadron that will attack there starts circling their target, while 11 Zeros head for Kaneohe Bay and the Navy Air Service base there, and 18 speed on towards Iwa Mooring Mast Field at Barbers Point Aerodrome, east of the Pearl Harbor entrance. That's also where Fuchida is about to arrive. The prize is now in his sights.
Commander, I see Pearl Harbor, Masazaki reported to me, gasping. I see it myself, Lieutenant. Turn the needle to the south to bring the plane to Barbers Point. Having given the instruction, I took the binoculars and gazed at Pearl Harbor. They're here, they're here. Battleships with tripod masts and cage masts. 1, 2, 3. I follow with my eyes and counted in my mind. As expected, the full set of 8 battleships was at anchor. I felt my temperature rise as I thought, thank goodness they're here.
I have to pause here To point out the irony of this moment, the goal of the Japanese is to deal a fatal blow to the US Navy, but the attack they are about to start will more or less end the age of the battleship, and once and for all, usher in the age of the aircraft carrier. Their goal is the battleships, though, which, destroyed or not, will now be obsolete. There are no American aircraft carriers at Pearl on this date, so they're intentionally attacking something obsolete to show that it's obsolete, but it's the main goal. In any case, with Japanese planes already flying over and along Oahu, Admiral Kimmel is finally fully briefed over the phone by Vincent Murphy, duty officer at Fleet Headquarters, about the submarine activity. Around 20 minutes ago, the officers on duty just under Kimmel had sent the report of the sub sunk by the PBY back for verification. They simply could not believe that the content could be correct. The officer in charge on the ground at Kaneohe Navy Air Service Station confirms the report. A report that in the very minute it is digested is yesterday's news. For now, the first planes of the Imperial Japanese Navy are sighted and alarms start going off. It's the beginning of several minutes of utter confusion among the US forces, which plays right into Genda's plan. Fuchida notes,
There was no sign of an air fight happening in the sky above. There were no flashes of anti-aircraft fire coming from the ground. The surprise attack seemed to have succeeded.
In Pearl Harbor itself, the alarm has not yet been sounded. The two parts of the main group are now approaching Eva on the north and south side, and they start to ready final preparations for their attack rounds. They split again. Fuchida.
The level bombing squadron broke into 10 groups of 5 planes each, forming a line astern. The planes kept a distance of 200 meters in order to avoid the turbulences of the fart,
The air current created by the forward plane.
This resulted in an extremely long line of planes. They were on a bombing course from the southwest to the northeast. Our bombing altitude was at 3,000 meters.
140 planes flying in formations is a hard sight to miss if you just look up. Countless civilian witnesses see the V-shaped lines and wonder what the heck the military is up to doing training exercises of this magnitude on a Sunday morning. By now they can be seen in Honolulu, Waikiki Beach, Barbers Point, well, most anywhere except Pearl Harbor. There's a patch of cloud passing over the harbor just as the attack is about to begin. It gains the Japanese an additional moment of surprise. The attack will begin at exactly the same time on all targets. They will achieve this, but there will be much confusion about the timing of the events because of the fog of battle, memory lapses, or just, clocks are not all synchronized. All planes are now at their targets, and a second attack code will start a rain of fire all over Oahu. It's again an abbreviation of Totseguki, assault, but this time with the addition of Raikegi, lightning or immediate. Together, they abbreviate as Tora, which also means tiger. At 7:53, Fuchida instructs his telegrapher to broadcast the order, and the code Tora, Tora, Tora goes out to his forces and to the Akagi. In an instant, the planes break formation. Dropping from the skies in single files, the dive bombers and fighters aim their propellers, guns, and bombs towards the ground. Torpedo bombers bank into steep descents to speed down towards the ground, closer and closer to their targets. The high-altitude bombers continue their steady pace. Fuchida's chief petty officer says, "Commander, Akagi has understood the transmission of Tora, Tora, Tora. Fuchida's plane is now part of the bomber formation." He keeps an eye on the rest of the forces as they approach their target, Battleship Row. Near the entrance of the harbor, Ward is still scouting for submarines when she observes the masses of planes heading from Barbers Point towards the lagoon. At 7:55, buglers all over the ships and the station sound "Assembly for Colors." On the Arizona, the band is ready. At Wheeler, Rasmussen is still in the bathroom. On the West Virginia, Delano is in the signaling room. Peggy Olsson is making her way from the maternity ward to the nursing station. Taylor and Welch are about to head out towards Halewa, and breakfast continues at the Stagners. The buglers are interrupted by the hissing of falling bombs, followed by explosions, falling debris, and high water plumes as the first bombs impact in the water on Ford Island, Wheeler, Ava, Kaneohe, Schofield, and Hickam. Then comes the roaring of planes descending upon them. The American planes lined up neatly on the runways are shattered into pieces and disappear into flames as fuel ignites. Immediately following the bombs, the fighters follow with strafing runs. At Wheeler, Rasmussen sees the first dive bomber from the window of the latrine, dashes for his quarters, gets on his flight jacket, his webbing with a belt and his .45 gun, and his shoes. Still in his pajama trousers, he runs through a hail of bullets, making for the planes to get into the air and fight. Many are more confused. Some think it's an exercise gone wrong. Civilians think the water plumes they see far away are from whales. But then comes the sound of explosions and the wailing of air raid sirens. It's terrifying, as Peggy Olsson describes.
We heard this terrible bomb, and then we heard another one, and I ran out all of a sudden. It shook the building. I said, we're all gonna be killed. Something's blown up. Then all of a sudden we saw the corpsmen running through the ramps. They yelled, stay away from the windows. The Japs are bombing.
At Pearl, the torpedo bombers now make their runs. Descending from an already low 200 feet, they now come rushing across the locks just 30 to 60 feet off the surface. In Cruiser Row, Raleigh is the first to be attacked. One torpedo passes ahead, but a second hits her port side amidships, and she immediately starts to list. On the other side of the island in Battleship Row, the torpedo bombers now come in pairs towards the immobile giants. All the ships are now sounding general quarters. The men scramble to get the machine guns and AA batteries armed and firing. In many places, they are hindered by the locked ammunition supplies. In a few cases, they even have to push past provosts, trying to keep them from breaking the locks and bust the ammo out by force. They're also hindered by the Japanese fighters strafing them over and over again, killing dozens of sailors on the decks to protect their bombers from being fired upon. In Pearl City, the Stagners rush out on the lawn.
The planes were so low, just barely above the rooftops, that we could see the pilots' faces and even the goggles that cover their eyes.
The Utah is torpedoed and begins to list rapidly. Some ships are now answering fire. The Arizona is hit by several torpedoes in consecutive runs. In one of those runs, fire from several directions takes out one of the Japanese planes. The Oklahoma is struck by 3 torpedoes on port side. The ship heels to port at 45 degrees. This, and oil and water on the decks, renders service to the guns ineffective. Captain Franklin Van Valkenburg of the Arizona arrives on the bridge to start coordinating the defense and trying to right the ship that is already starting to list. A quartermaster in the pilot house asks the captain repeatedly to go to the conning tower, a less exposed position in view of the Japanese strafing. Van Valkenburg adamantly refuses and continues to man the telephone. Ford Island now broadcasts, air raid on Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill. The Antares, still sailing, has joined the fight, shooting down one plane and causing another to drop and explode its torpedo in the bank of the channel. In Pearl, the Stagner father barks at the family.
Get in the car, we gotta get away from the harbor. But as we tried to get into our car, military police and jeeps shouted at everyone to get all civilian cars off the streets immediately, driving them up into yards if necessary. We could soon see why, as truckloads of servicemen tore about, trying desperately to get to their posts. Many of the men were still dressing, pulling on their pants or shirts or shoes, some even hanging out the tailgate.
West Virginia is hit twice by torpedoes and heavy shocks are felt on the hull. She is punctured forward and on the port side and begins to list rapidly to port. A third heavy shock to port and the plane on top of turret 4 catches on fire. A heavy explosion follows with about a 20-degree list to port. Central Station is directed to counterflood. Raleigh has a heavy list to port and it appears she might capsize. The crew jettisons topside weight while the gunners start to fire back. Radio broadcasts are now interrupted and replaced by repeated warnings. Air raid, Pearl Harbor. This is no maneuver, this is the real McCoy. Shortly after 8 a.m., public radio orders all medical personnel to their stations. Antares is strafed by machine gun fire. On Utah, the captain sees 5 planes flying low in his direction. The Tennessee has manned her guns, and the steamers are preparing to set sail. But that becomes impossible. West Virginia begins to pull Tennessee into its own list. Oglala and Helena, moored together, are hit by 2 torpedoes simultaneously. In the West Lock, Helm has gotten her engines up and running and commences maneuvering towards the harbor entrance. On Arizona, Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd, commander of Battleship Division 1, is trying to make his way to the bridge to coordinate overall defenses. On California, while Zeros strafe the ship, Lieutenant Marion Little, senior officer on board, orders the guns manned and for the crew to make preparations to get underway. Utah is now under attack by both a torpedo plane and the bombers. She can't repel attacks as all ammunition is secured in magazines. Her heavier guns are covered with steel housing, with the machine guns dismounted and stowed below decks. The ship is also covered with 2 layers of 6x12 planks because she had been used as a bombing target during exercises. A torpedo hits, causing severe underwater damage at frame 84, port side, followed by another hit, causing a 15-degree list. A bomb explodes in the port aft castle. Mr. Stagner drives his black Ford pickup truck off-road and through the Pearl back alleys towards higher ground, further away from the docks. At Wheeler, the attacks continue. By now, the field is a bloody mess, strewn with bodies and the wrecks of the P-40s. Hangars are burning. Bombs keep on raining down, and the Zeros come again and again to strafe the men and women trying to assemble a defense. Rasmussen, still in pajamas, is trying to scramble a plane that will still fly. He is now joined by other pilots, among them his squadron leader, Lieutenant Lewis Sanders, and Peggy's fiancé, Gordon. Several of them are still in tuxedo pants and dress shoes from last night. Peggy describes the bombing at Wheeler.
They were dropping bombs. Later we found out they were bombing the mess halls at Wheeler Field. They'd drop a bomb and the fellows would run out of the mess hall and then they'd shoot them down.
Taylor and Welch decide that there is no chance at Wheeler, call Halewa and tell them to prep planes. They tear off in Taylor's red Buick. At Hickam, the situation is even worse, and the ground crew struggle under fire to clear a runway for the incoming B-17s. 2 torpedo bombers are making a run for the Nevada, anchored alone off Ford Island. The ship's machine gunners open fire on the planes and bring one down before it can drop its load, but the second drops. The torpedo strikes Nevada on the port bow. Below deck, the steamers are frantic to get the engines running. Maryland and Tennessee are now returning fire. Far above it all, Fuchida is nearly hit.
With a banging sound, the plane was severely rocked. Matsuzaki asked me, "Commander, were we hit?" While I was going to check the damage myself, Mizuki responded. "A shell splinter hit the left rear of our fuselage and has ripped open a hole. The control cable was cut and it's supported only by a single strand. I cannot reach it to fix it."
The men on the California open fire with the ready guns on the attacking planes, but shortages of ammunition impede their fire. Communications officer Henry Bernstein has the head of department duty, but was sitting in his room half-dressed when the attack began. In that state, he runs to the quarterdeck where he sees 2 approaching torpedo bombers at an altitude of less than 100 feet, and as he moves aft, sees them drop their torpedoes. He rushes to ensure that the crew break out the keys for the magazines and promptly begins distributing ammunition, and then takes his station in the conning tower. Although the Pennsylvania is in dry dock, the men have manned their battle stations, and they're now firing back at the Japanese. The already damaged Raleigh receives a bomb hit, causing her to sink down with the stern level with her afterdeck, where she holds steady. Fuchida.
Thus, my first bombing squadron group made a big turnaround to the right to repeat our attack approach. In the meantime, the second group that followed had started the level bombing attack. It was 8:04 a.m. when they dropped their bombs.
Utah is now listing about 40 degrees to port. Attacking planes strafe the crew as they abandon ship. The torpedo bombers have almost completed their runs now and are running out of ammunition. In one of the final runs, 2 torpedoes tear into the California's port side near frame 100, punching a 40-foot long hole extending from the first seam below the armor belt to the bilge keel. The torpedoes strike almost simultaneously, the first one forward between frames 45 and 60, and the second one aft between frames 95 and 109. Their effect is disastrous. The ship commences listing to port and ominously strains its mooring lines. Commander Little orders counter-flooding of the starboard voids to limit the list to 4 degrees. The third deck floods as water pours through the open manholes of the voids underneath and aft through loose manhole covers and leaky deck seams. Alongside Arizona, Vestal's AA guns are jammed, but they continue firing the machine guns, hitting one of the retreating torpedo planes, which bursts into flames and disappears over Ford Island. But as the torpedo runs end, the bombers intensify. The first round of high-altitude bombers targeted Ford Island and the harbor in general. Now they focus on Battleship Row, with Oklahoma, West Virginia, Arizona, and repair ship Vestal heavily damaged from torpedoes, and Maryland and Tennessee locked in. Japanese move in for the kill. West Virginia takes 2 bomb hits from 15-inch armor-piercing shells fitted with fins. The first bomb penetrates the superstructure deck, wrecking the port casemates and causing that deck to collapse to the level of the galley deck below. 4 casemates and the galley catch fire immediately, which detonates the ready service projectiles stowed in the casemates. The second bomb hits further aft, wrecking one Vought OS-2U Kingfisher float plane on the high catapult on turret 3 and throwing the second one on her top on the main deck below. The projectile penetrates the 4-inch turret roof, wrecking one gun in the turret itself. The bomb is a dud, but burning gasoline from the damaged aircraft starts a fire. Vestal takes 2 hits as well. One penetrates through 3 decks, exploding below deck, cutting the fire main and electric cables in the crew space and setting the hold on fire. The second passes through the fuel and oil tank. The explosion damages practically all stores. The heat of the explosion forces the crew to immediately flood the forward magazines to stop the hull from rupturing. The ships are also leaking oil into the surrounding water around, oil that now catches fire. Bombs explode on the docks, sending debris raining all over. The entire lagoon has been transformed into a scene reminiscent of Dante's Inferno. Explosions and flames everywhere, billowing black smoke from the oil fires, men fleeing in drove off of ships that are being lost, only to clamber onto neighboring ships to continue fighting. The Japanese fighter planes are descending like harpies and gargoyles, while their dragon sisters drop load after load of precision bombs from above. Up there, far away from the ocean-level explosions, the ships are like toy boats that pass into the target scopes of the bombers. Right now, at 8:08, the battleship Arizona passes into those scopes. 2 bombs hit. One of them is a 1,720-pound bomb, probably released from the Nakajima B-5N2 Type 97 carrier attack plane commanded by Kasumi Tadashi of the carrier Hiryu's air unit. It glances off the faceplate of turret 2 and penetrates the deck into the black powder magazine. There it explodes, which in turn sets off the adjacent smokeless powder magazines. A cataclysmic explosion rips through the forward part of the ship, touching off fierce fires that will continue to burn for 2 days. Debris showers down on Ford Island and into the water. Over 1,000 men die in this instant. Among them, all members of the ship's band, Captain Van Valkenburg and Rear Admiral Kidd. A rain of body parts comes down on the deck of Vestal. The concussion throws around 100 men, including her captain, overboard, but also instantly puts out all her fires. The crewmen still aboard the Vestal immediately begin rescuing their shipmates and the now burn victim refugees from Arizona out of the water. The massive explosion is noticed by everyone in the harbor, far beyond and all the planes above it. It's like a grand finale of a symphony of destruction and death, but it is not the end of the attack. It's been barely 14 minutes since it began. It's not even the end of the first wave, which as we know will be followed by another wave, and perhaps another after that. What started as a pleasant Sunday morning for the sailors, airmen, nurses, doctors, and families of the U.S. forces on Oahu has now become a day of fire and brimstone.